Today we are working on what's called completing the square. We are starting chapter 7. We'll do a few sections of chapter 7 and then we'll kind of skip around and connect different chapters together. But today we're going to learn something very important for graphing parabolas, for graphing circles, and other conic shapes called completing the square. We're going to jump back to chapter 4 to begin this lesson. So when I had something like a plus b squared, chapter 4 called this a special product because this equals a squared plus 2ab plus b squared, okay? Which means that a squared plus 2ab plus b squared could be factored back into a plus b squared. Okay, so let's suppose that I just replace a and b, and I call that x and alpha. Okay, alpha is just a number. Okay, it's a fancy looking number because it's a Greek letter, alpha, right? But really it's just going to stand for a regular number. It might be like 2 or 3 or -5 or 1/2 or anything like that. Okay, so it's just a stand-in for a number. But if I expand this in the same form, it's going to be x squared plus 2 alpha x plus alpha squared. Okay, you can show that by foiling as well, but I'm just skipping the foiling step. Okay, so if I can FOIL to equal the one thing, then that means I can factor back into x plus alpha squared. Okay, so let's go ahead and just keep them in mind for now. Now, this chapter is all about solving equations, okay? And it's solving equations when I have a variable that's squared. So if I have y squared equals 49, this is pretty easy to solve because I can just take the square root of both sides to solve. And then y would equal 7, right? Okay, now there's one more thing because I have y squared, right? And there's actually two things that can square to equal 49. It's not just 7, but also -7, which means y is going to be equal to plus or minus 7. So that plus or minus is going to come up a ton. You never want to forget it, and we've talked about it before. Basically, we're always going to add plus or minus whenever you take the square root to solve an equation. So if I'm undoing an equation, there's a square on my variable. If I'm taking the square root of both sides, then I'm going to put a plus or minus in front of it. Okay, moving on to another example. If we have y minus 8 squared, and that's equal to 49, let's suppose we have this. Okay, so if I have that, that means I can just undo that square by just taking the square root, and then I'll have y minus 8 by itself. Okay, but recall that we're going to need to have that plus or minus right in front of the square root. So then I'm going to add 8 to both sides, and then it's going to be 8 plus or minus 7 because the square root of 49 is 7. Okay, which means 8 plus 7 is 15, 8 minus 7 is 1, so y is equal to 15, 1. So here, this was really convenient to solve, right? If I had, y plus something squared equals some number, that was really easy to solve. So let's suppose I take a different example, and it's not in that form, right? That was easy to solve, but let's say it's y squared plus 8y plus 6. Can I factor this? Well, I started thinking about it, right? Can I factor this number? Is there anything that multiplies to 6 and adds to 8? Well, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Now, there is some numbers, but they might be irrational. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get something into this form that was easy for me to solve, like the last problem we did. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this form here, where I have x squared plus 2 alpha x plus alpha squared, and it factors into x plus alpha squared. Okay, so I'm going to slip that underneath here. As you can see, I'm having trouble lifting those pages. I'm going to slip that under there so that we can see how this is going to work. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to move 6 out of the way. I'm going to move it to the other side. So any numbers you're going to want to move to the other side as a first step. And now I'm going to look at this 8y term. Okay, I'm going to highlight it here. So 8y. I want to set this equal to that 2 alpha x term, okay? Because I'm trying to get something in the form of x squared plus 2 alpha x plus alpha squared. So 2 alpha is equal to the thing in front of the y, which in this case is 8. Okay, so then if I divide by 2, right, my goal is I'm going to get something that is alpha squared, right? So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. I get alpha is equal to 4, which means alpha squared equals 16. Okay, so 16 is actually what I'm going to add to both sides so that I'll actually be in that form, x squared plus 2 alpha x plus alpha squared. So when I add 16 to both sides, I end up with y squared plus 8y plus 16 equals 10. Okay, which now I know I can factor this. This is a square. I can factor into x plus alpha squared, and my alpha is 4, right? I figured that out. So then I can factor this into y plus 4 squared, where 4 times 4 is 16, and 4 plus 4 is 8. So we're good to go. Awesome. Okay, now this is really easy to solve because all I have to do is take the square root of both sides. Y plus 4 is equal to plus or minus square root 10, and then I subtract 4 from both sides to finish solving for y. Obviously, it would really be hard to come up with that number in your head. So we solved by completing the square. Let's do another example. Suppose I have p squared plus 20p, and then this is going to be plus 200 is equal to 0. Okay, so here the first thing I want to do is get rid of whatever number is kind of in my way. So I'm getting rid of the 200, I'm putting it on the other side. It's still going to be there, right, but I'm just getting it out of my way for now. Now I'm going to look at that middle term, right, the p term, and I'm going to see that 20 is there. 20 is in front of the p. So 20 is equal to alpha, or 2 alpha is equal to 20. That was kind of like a weird order of writing it. Anyway, alpha is equal to 10, which means alpha squared is equal to 100. And 100 is going to be what we add to both sides of this equation. Okay, so I have p squared plus 20p. I'm going to add 100, and that's going to be equal to negative 200 plus 100, which is just negative 100. Okay, so I'm adding 100 to both sides. Remember always to add that alpha squared to both sides. Okay, p squared plus 20p plus 100 factors into p plus alpha squared, and alpha is 10, so it's p plus 10 squared. Okay, and then I can take the square root to solve, and I get a plus or minus, and I end up with, because that's negative 100, it's going to be 10i that comes out. So p is equal to negative 10 plus or minus 10i. And we are done there. Fantastic. Moving on. Now we're going to have something different where I don't just have n squared, but I actually have 3n squared. But we're going to begin the same way. I'm going to get rid of that 1 because it's kind of in my way. So I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides of my equation. And I end up with 3n squared plus 12n equals negative 1. Okay, now I don't like this 3 here. I want n squared to be by itself, or x squared, or whatever variable I'm talking about. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. Okay, if I divide both sides by 3, I end up with n squared plus 4n equals negative 1/3. Okay, some fractions here. Fun, fun, fun. Okay, so now I can figure out what 2 alpha is. 2 alpha is equal to the thing in front of the n, which in this case is 4. Okay, so then if I divide both sides by 2, I get alpha equals 2. Alpha squared would be 4, which means I'm going to add 4 to both sides to complete my square, because now I can factor n squared plus 4n plus 4 into n plus alpha squared, which is n plus 2 squared, and that's equal to 11 over 3. I turned 4 into 12/3, just so you know. Anyway, I take the square root of both sides to solve. I end up with a plus or minus root 11 over 3, which is negative 2 plus or minus root 11 over root 3. I'm going to multiply by root 3 over root 3, and I end up with negative 2 plus or minus root 33 over 3 when I finish simplifying. Make sure you get radicals out of the bottom, like I did here, or any i's out of the bottom if you end up with those. Always a good thing to do. Okay, so suppose we have y squared minus 3y minus 5 equals 0. So I want to add 5 to both sides as my first step. Once I add 5, I end up with y squared minus 3y equals 5. The y squared is by itself, so that's good. Now my 2 alpha is equal to negative 3, which means my alpha is equal to negative 3 halves, and my alpha squared is equal to 9/4. Okay, now it would be kind of difficult to factor y squared. I'm adding alpha squared to both sides to factor y squared plus minus 3y plus 9/4, but I can remember that it's always in the form of y plus alpha squared, and alpha in this case is negative 3 halves, so it's y minus 3 halves squared. I forgot the square there, so I'm going to add it now. And then here I have this equals 20/4, which is 5, right? 5 is 20/4, plus 9/4, which I added to both sides. So then if I take the square root of both sides, I end up with plus or minus rad 29 over 4, which is plus or minus rad 29 over rad 4, which is plus or minus rad 29 over 2. And then if I combine both of those numbers after I've added 3 halves to both sides, then I end up with y is equal to 3 plus or minus rad 29 over 2. Now I can keep that, that whole thing above 2. I don't have to split it up unless there's an I term. Then you would split it up. All right, good luck on your homework and have a great day.